After lunch, the bulldozer and the cranes started up towards the lighthouse. There was a very narrow part where the track went close to the edge of the cliff. The bulldozer and the crane would have to go past there. Stan and I sat down on the track. We held hands and waited. I hope they don't run over us, I said to Stan. They won't, he replied, but he didn't sound too sure. It didn't take long for the bulldozer to reach us. Its big steel blade stopped just in front of our faces. The driver got down. Get out of the way, he said, or I'll squash you flat. No, said Stan, we're not moving. His voice was shaking. I looked up at the driver. He was an ugly looking brute, and he was big, very big. He picked Stan up with one hand and threw him out of the way. Stan landed on the ground with a thump. He didn't move. He looked as if he was hurt. Leave him alone, I screamed. He's an old man. Leave him alone. The driver gave an ugly grin. Now it's your turn, he said. He picked me up the same way. I kicked and struggled, but it was no good. He threw me out of the way. 3 other men came and held me down. The bulldozer and the crane moved up towards the lighthouse. The crane stopped right in front of the lighthouse door. The big steel balls started to swing backwards and forwards through the air. Then I noticed something. The wind had stopped blowing. It was very still. I listened carefully. Yes, I could hear the music. I could hear music. The door of the lighthouse opened, and out came the clarinet and the saxophone. They were playing When the Saints Come Marching In. The driver of the crane couldn't believe what he was seeing. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. A saxophone and clarinet were floating through the air, playing a tune. He jumped off the crane and ran down the track. He was screaming his head off. The saxophone floated up above the seat of the crane. The crane started moving backwards towards the sea. One of the ghosts had put it into reverse gear. It rumbled slowly towards the cliff. The ghost was still sitting on it. I could see the saxophone. It was still over the driver's seat. Then the crane started to tumble over the cliff. At the last minute, the ghost jumped clear. The saxophone came floating back. The driver of the bulldozer let out a roar. He put the blade up and drove towards the lighthouse. Stan jumped up and pulled one of the levers. The bulldozer turned and headed towards the cliff. Stan and the driver were both struggling over the controls. The bulldozer got closer and closer to the edge. The driver suddenly jumped off. Stan tried to jump off too, but his leg was stuck. The bulldozer tipped over the edge and fell. Down, down, down it went, and Stan went with it. It tumbled over and over, and then it crashed on the rocks beneath. The ghost started playing louder and louder. It wasn't a tune, it was a loud roaring noise. It was angry and sad at the same time. Then both instruments fell to the ground. I didn't know where the ghosts were. Then I saw the driver rise into the air. The ghosts were lifting him up. They suddenly dropped him. He fell into his head. He let out a scream and started running down the track. The other men followed him. They were scared to death. I went and looked over the edge of the cliff. 2 ghosts picked up their instruments and stood next to me. I couldn't see them. I could just see the saxophone and the clarinet floating in the air. I knew that Stan was dead. No one would have lived through that crash. The ghost started playing a sad, sad tune. I knew the first lines. They were, we'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. I looked at the grey sea. The wind was blowing the spray high into the air. The wind. Quick! I yelled. Back to the lighthouse. The wind is getting up. But I was too late. A sudden gust of wind blew both ghosts over the edge and out to sea. I watched as the clarinet and saxophone drifted away, getting smaller and smaller. They looked like 2 tiny leaves blowing in a storm. In the end, I couldn't see them anymore. They were gone. Well, that is just about the end of the story. Stan was buried in the tiny cemetery next to the other 2 graves. The wreckers left and didn't come back. Their union said that men would not work on the island. They said it was too dangerous. I was made lighthouse keeper. I've been here for a year now. I love the island. I hope I can always stay here, but it gets very lonely. I often wish that Stan was still alive. Last night something happened, something good. It was Friday. I was just closing my eyes when I thought I heard music. It was coming from the lighthouse. I jumped out of bed and ran as fast as I could. I stopped when I reached the music room door. It was a saxophone and a clarinet, but something was different. I pushed open the door a tiny bit and peeped in. The clarinet and the saxophone were floating in the air as usual, but there was another instrument as well. It was a violin. It looked as if it were playing itself. I knew that Stan was playing it. There were 3 ghosts now. I smiled to myself and closed the door. As I walked back down the stairs, I hummed a tune to myself. I knew the song well. It was Happy days are here again.